Bridge. You are listening to the Be the Bridge podcast with Latasha Morrison.
How you guys doing today? It's exciting.
Each week, Be the Bridge podcast tackles subjects related to race and culture with the goal of bringing understanding.
But I'm going to do it in the spirit of love.
We believe understanding can move us toward racial healing, racial equity, and racial unity. Latasha Morrison is the founder of Be the Bridge, which is an organization responding to racial brokenness and systemic injustice in our world. This podcast is an extension of our vision to make sure people are no longer conditioned by a racialized society, but grounded in truth. If you have not hit the subscribe button, please do so now. Without further ado, let's begin today's podcast. Oh, and stick around for some important information at the end.
Forgive me if I sound a little nasally, but I had to take a COVID test today because I have an upcoming gallbladder surgery. So keep me in prayer. But that said, y'all know I love all our episodes and all of our guests. But today's conversation unearths elements within the Black community that some of you may not be aware of. So, at different points, we'll cut in to define terminology and make you aware of organizations that you may or may not be aware of for the purpose of context. This was all made easier with today's guest, Dante Stewart. Dante is a writer and speaker who has been featured on CNN, as well as in The Washington Post, Christianity Today, Sojourners, The Whiteness, a Black Christian collective, Comment Magazine, and more. Dante writes and speaks about the intersectionality of race, religion, and politics. And if his name sounds familiar to some of you hardcore college football fans, Dante was a cornerback for the Clemson Tigers. He's currently studying at the Candler School of Theology at Emory University in my hometown of Atlanta. Today, we're going to deal with transition in proximity to whiteness. Assimilation is one transition that is made in proximity to whiteness. The perception of how acceptance and respectability can be attained is through adopting the habits and practices of America's dominant group, white people. This adopting of habits and practices is known as assimilation. What some may know is the seeds of assimilationist thinking are planted in the hearts and minds of Christians through programming instituted by the church. Here's the kicker. Assimilationist thinking can be ingrained in Black people through the Black church. With that said, let's start our conversation with Dante here. Check this out.
Yeah, actually, I grew up Pentecostal.
Oh,
incredibly.
okay.
Yeah, for anybody who really know Pentecostal, I actually grew up apostolic.
Did you guys have like all-night prayers and all that stuff?
You know we did. I mean, we what?
We don't do that no more. We don't do that no more. We need to get back to that. It's something in that.
My family's still doing that.
You know what I'm saying?
So during July every year, they have convocation, church convention time. And every Friday night of church convention time is the midnight cry, where we'll have service all week. So churches from Baltimore, Philly, Detroit, all over South Carolina, they would all come to like Columbia, and we'll have church on Sunday through Sunday. So every single day there's something. Yeah. And Thursday to the weekend is all day. Like you got seminars and things like that. And then Friday, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday is the kind of extravaganza. Friday is the midnight cry. We'll have the young people service on Friday, brotherhood service on Thursday, so it's always a big one. And then young people service on Friday, and then the midnight cry, which will start at 12 o'clock and probably end at like 3. Church will end at like 11. We'll start at like 7, church will end at like 11. And people go to Waffle House and then come back.
And then come back for more church.
Yeah,
so it started at 7,
church.
ended at 11. Mm-hmm. You go get something to eat, and then you come back for the midnight cry. So let that sink in. Imagine any group of people, young and old, spending that much time in church every week. But it gets deeper. We got to dig into the history a bit to lay a foundation.
Of course,
let's keep going.
Pentecostalism found its kind of origins within the movement of William Seymour. So what's interesting about Pentecostalism is much like much of American history, we believe that, every great movement was started by a white man. So it was started and influenced and carried on by white men. And so that's kind of how the story of Pentecostalism is told through Topeka, Kansas with Charles Parham. But actually, the Pentecostal movement was started by William Seymour, who, if I'm not mistaken, I think he came from Louisiana. And he traveled, if I'm not mistaken, I think he came up from Louisiana to Cleveland, Ohio, to Los Angeles, which Los Angeles, if people are familiar, Azusa Street revivals in the early 1900s was the beginning of what we now call Pentecostalism. It was started in Azusa Street at the Azusa Street revivals, where you had all these people from everywhere. I mean, it was an absolutely incredible.
They would have a church.
They was having church, but that wasn't the crazy thing. That wasn't even simply it. I mean, Pentecostalism was a socially progressive movement in the early Jim Crow. You have this movement that is integrated.
Okay.
I mean, you got Baptists, you got Methodists, you got Presbyterians coming, and everybody getting baptized in the Holy Ghost. But it was also a socially progressive movement. It was a movement that became a political alternative to the segregationist logic of Los Angeles during that time. What was an interesting story about that movement with Charles Parham, he comes from Topeka, Kansas, because he gets a message about the things that's going on in Los Angeles. And he comes and observes the movement that's happening. And you want to know what this white brother says?
What did he say?
He called it crude Negroisms. And he left. What was interesting is that William Seymour started to deny or question whether tongues was a sign of the Holy Spirit or was love the greatest sign.
Now you understand a bit of the history and atmosphere of the church Dante grew up in. But now let's get into his personal upbringing a bit as well. I'm setting up context for a reason, so stay with us.
In their book, True to Our Native Land, a New Testament interpretation, African-American New Testament interpretation of William Seymour, and him saying, what is the surest sign of the Holy Spirit is breaking the bonds of segregation and not glossolalia, as scholars would call, the Greek term of tongues, glossolalia. And that represented, that represented, a kind of breaking away from, or and not even a breaking away, I would say a certain type of reimagining faith by William Seymour, which in some sense, Pentecostals would be marked by that, a certain type of reimagination of faith. Or whatnot. And so out of that movement, kind of going to the apostolic faith, out of that movement was when apostolic really started to kind of catch traction. And it was all over, the doctrine of whether, tongues is the initial evidence of the Spirit or whether it's not. And this is where you would see Kojic and apostolics. So Black Pentecostals, Kojic, and apostolics. Now it's super reductionistic kind of history. This is why you have Kojic and like apostolics, because they kind of disagree about doctrinal stuff regarding tongues. And some of them disagree about women in ministry and stuff like that. So
I mentioned football earlier, but that is yet another layer of context. Listen.
Yeah, so actually, I walked on to Clemson. So I was recruited in South Carolina. So I was recruited by a lot of major schools or whatnot, but I wanted to stay in state. And
But because you went to the black high school, because you went to the black high school, they won't come into the black high schools to recruit, right?
Yeah, well, South Carolina was, Clemson wasn't.
Okay,
University of South Carolina was.
Okay. I mean, but that's something that we got to, that's another conversation, but about how recruitment happens and what schools they go to and why we have to, like, sometimes get our black kids into white schools or into private schools so that they can get a look at some of these division, these Division I schools and stuff like that. But so you were recruited by South Carolina.
Yeah, but then the offer fell through, and then I was like, you know what, I'm walking on at Clemson. So I ended up walking on at Clemson. I didn't have to try out because they knew me, and I was a pretty good known player in South Carolina or whatnot. So it was just like, show up to camp. Or whatnot, and then you technically on the team. And so I showed up, and crazy, I was the only one that showed up in shorts and a white shirt and some khaki shorts. Everybody else, showed up because they was already there. And so I was just getting there doing fall camp or whatnot. And ended up having a good career at Clemson. Had a great time. It was fun.
Playing football in the South.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand that. It's one thing, Southwest, I know Texas has their football, but playing football in the South, like North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, that's a whole nother ball game. It becomes you become little superstars, when you play football, especially for a college like Clemson, what was that environment like on the football field? Because now you're walking into this very diverse environment, coming from, black school, black church, black community, and going into Clemson.
Yeah, it really was. But, I'm pretty adaptable. Adaptable oftentimes means, I'm really good at assimilating.
He said that he was good at assimilating. Okay, let's keep going.
And so a lot of times, people say, hey, I'm adaptable in many environments. Well, nah, not really. It's like oftentimes adaptable means like you got to lose like a serious part of yourself. And, that's the thing. And, this the complexities of race. Especially with people in your generation and my generation, it's like parents, because we were the post-integration generations, it was like, in order for you to make it, you can't be too black going into these spaces. So, you keep your head down, you do your work and make sure you handle your business, you don't get too involved and race stuff. And it's not that, they didn't want us to. It was that it was kind of for our own protection because they knew because they knew that to be really black in these white spaces, oftentimes
would work against us.
Would work against us. It was oftentimes, penalized and criminalized and demonized or whatnot. And so, going into Clemson is a huge bubble for black athletes. There is Black Clemson, which every major predominantly white institution. For the listeners who don't know, there is HBCUs and there is PWIs. Or whatnot. PWI is a predominantly white institution. Clemson is a predominantly white institution. And so at Clemson, at predominantly white institutions, you usually have, Black Clemson or Black Georgia or Black South Carolina, which tries to cultivate a certain type of, family kind of environment, kind of HBCU experience within the kind of larger Clemson experience.
Let's take a pause. Let's really let that last statement sink in.
Wow, this is so good. Let's take a really quick break, and we will be back shortly. Be prepared to learn something new.
Navigating the stress of sudden changes in income, health complications, and/or the loss of someone close can be overwhelming, not to mention the stress of this tense time of political and social disharmony. Honestly, at this time, we could all use a little help. Well, guess what? There's BetterHelp.com. That's better, HELP. BetterHelp.com makes professional counseling accessible, affordable, and convenient for anyone who may currently struggle with life's challenges. If that's you, you can get help anytime, anywhere. BetterHelp.com offers access to licensed, trained, experienced, and accredited psychologists, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, and board-licensed professional counselors. We want you to start living a happier life today. So as a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting BetterHelp.com/BeTheBridge. Join the over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp.com/BeTheBridge. Don't fall into the trap of trying to help yourself. Get better help at BetterHelp.com.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's pick up Latasha's conversation with today's guest.
Being at Clemson, being black at Clemson, I don't even know if I was necessarily aware, because being athletes, especially black athletes, you get trained so well to not deal with race, to kind of be like the transcendent race man. You kind of, like I'm here to play. I'm a football player first. I'm black second, and so it's like that thing, that when people talk about Christian identity. So I'm not someone who says, my first identity is Christian. It's just that's just not the case, or whatnot. I mean, it's a meaningful identity, but when I walk outside into the world, the first thing people ain't seeing, is Christian.
Right.
I mean, the first thing people see is black, and that means I need to make sense of that somehow. But when we go to college as black athletes, we believe the lie that, we are first athletes and then we're black second. We're black second.
Listen to this story related to a Trayvon Martin demonstration.
In 2012, when Trayvon Martin happened, the black athletes, some of my black teammates, ended up doing a photo shoot in hoodies to stand in solidarity with Trayvon. And, I got asked whether I was going to do it. And I was like, nah, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to be a distraction. And so I believed the lie, that, that black bodies on the field performing well was more important than black bodies being murdered down in Florida.
Did you catch that? Assimilationist thinking distorts priorities. It gets deeper. Check this out.
The church that I was a part of, no apostolic churches was around.
Okay.
That's where, you get introduced as an athlete to FCA.
When Dante mentions FCA, he's speaking of an organization called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
And, that's what happened to me. And that really, this was the beginning of assimilation for me. Playing football and getting hooked up with FCA and things like that. It's like, they got Bible study every week, and, growing up Christian, you learn, okay, you need to be doing something to feed yourself spiritually. Yeah. And so, I would go to FCA, and so then, over time, you just keep going and you start to associate like, this is legitimate. This is the right way of doing things versus, the apostolic church that I grew up in. And so I learned how to look down on the ways in which I was raised. I learned how to see, that type of way of doing life as less than, because at the FCA meetings at Clemson, which is, a great meeting, big meeting, you're not seeing no preachers that look like you. It ain't no praise breaks and hooping. It ain't no, old sisters messing with you for acting up. It ain't no shouting and stuff like that. And so you just kind of learn through this environment.
I mentioned before that Dante was a sociology major at Clemson. What he says here is so good. Listen.
Usually our social location determines our social values. Okay. And those social values then in turn kind of shape our social priorities. And our social priorities then in turn shape our social rhythms. Okay. And then our social rhythms in turn shape how we name, see, and imagine the world. And so that would be what, C. Wright Mills, sociologists would call the sociological imagination, how people make sense of the world. And what I fail to realize in college, and a lot of times what we fail to realize, is that none of us are walking into a neutral story. There's no such thing as a neutral kind of religious environment.
Right.
There's no such thing as a neutral story. There's always a story here before I got here that's invited me to see myself as a certain type of person and kind of embody a certain type of action. Okay. And so with FCA, as we understand kind of the history, it's a movement that's deeply immersed in white evangelicalism. And being deeply immersed in white evangelicalism, the kind of values, priorities, and rhythms, and kind of the ways that they make meaning and purpose and make sense of faith, is oftentimes in a very real way, very much different than the way Black people learn how to make sense of the world, learn how to make sense of faith. And so going to FCA kind of was, the beginnings of that kind of assimilation for me, and being in proximity to whiteness and saying, hey, this is right. This is normal. This is true. This is what we should aspire to, rather than seeing it as this is different. This is meaningful to some people. This has limitations and potentials, and this should be critically engaged.
Okay.
And so I didn't necessarily have that. And so that represented for me, a culture shock during that time while I was at Clemson. And I mean, when I went all in, I was all in.
Assimilationist thinking and behavior can become a way of life for some. But in Dante's case, there was an awakening. I don't want to spoil it, so let him tell you about it. This is great.
So for me, the catalytic event, for me really was Alton Sterling.
Okay.
It was really, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, then Trump. Which woke me up, which showed me, I need something different. So while I was connected in Clemson with FCA, when my wife and we moved out to so I graduated in 2014, and then my wife and we moved out to California because she was in the Air Force and we got stationed out there. Okay. And so then being at FCA, instead of picking an apostolic church, when we moved, I chose, a white church, and so back to social location and social values and social priorities. And so a priority for me was, being connected to a church, but it was, I associated being connected to a church with being connected to a white church. And so we was out there. And so then 2015, fast forward to 2015, we're now back in Augusta. We got stationed in Georgia. And then same thing happened. I chose a white church. And what's crazy is my wife actually, didn't really dig the church. But, because I was so concerned about being in ministry, I was just, I was head over heels about being involved in ministry.
There are going to be some white Christian pastors and leaders that will either be shocked, hurt, and or offended by this next statement. But let me say this. If there's a white leader or pastor that can hear this next statement and their reaction is ambivalence, then for you, that statement will be a heart check. Let's listen.
I was a part of a church here and chose a church here, and my wife did not want to go. It was Southern Baptist Reformed Church.
Okay. And Jesus.
Yeah, it was an interesting process.
Okay.
And the sad part about that was, I kind of, because of my, just associating, white with right, it was like I forced us to stay.
Okay.
Black women, oftentimes are not only just undervalued, but they're invisible in these white spaces. And, when we as Black men get in these spaces, we do everything that we can to sustain it and keep it. And they opened up opportunities for me. I was a young, charismatic Black dude, and I could spit Reformed theology with the best of them. And then Alton Sterling happened. I'll never forget. Alton Sterling and seeing Alton Sterling get murdered. And I mean, I could see it right now in just his red shirt and his khaki shorts. And Tasha, that thing tore me up. It wrecked me. Like, it wrecked me because I didn't know how to make sense of it. And going to this white church, nobody was really trying to make sense of it. And then the next day, Philando happened. And it's just like, I know I'm angry, but I don't know why I'm angry.
Okay.
I know I'm like really mad and really want to say some stuff. And I know I don't even want to be around these white folk. Okay. But I mean, I'm around them and, you know, I can't really be too honest about what I'm feeling because, you know, we learn real well to hide your emotions.
Yeah.
But
why do we learn? Let's get. I just want to get into that a little bit. Why do you have to, in those environments? Why do you have to learn to hide your emotions? What is the fear?
I think it's more so fear from white people. Like Eddie Glaude in his book Democracy in Black has a chapter entitled White Fear. I don't think white brothers and sisters know how to handle the force and the complexity of Black pain and rage. Okay. So, as a group, I'm not saying like, and I think this is important. Like when I speak of white people, because I say that I talk about white people all the time, and I talk about white Christians all the time. You know, I'm talking about as a group, white people, and particularly white Christians. You know, on the one hand, I think it's from their side. They don't know how to deal with it. Because for them to deal with it is for them to deal with themselves. And white people in this country, you know, collectively have not necessarily dealt with what their apathy, their complicity, and their complacency on matters of race and white supremacy means.
I feel encouragement is needed at this point. So I asked this question: what encouragement do you have? You know, what do you want to say to the predominantly white church right now, especially those who are resisting this work of you know, racial healing and reconciliation and racial justice, which, you know, all of those line together, you know what I'm saying? Because we, you know, you're only going to have healing through reconciliation, you know what I'm saying? Yes. And you're only going to have reconciliation through racial justice. And so what would you say to, you know, Black people, you know, that are out there right now? And then what would you say to the church?
I would say read James Cone's book. Okay. Said I wasn't going to tell nobody.
Okay.
I mean, that's, for me, that's hands down.
Okay.
That's just hands down.
Okay.
And I think the biggest, that would be the one thing really, would be connect to Black literature.
Okay.
You know, connect to Black literature.
To our stories, to our history.
Yes. I mean, there are so many Black writers out there. I mean, there is so much Black literature. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking around my room right now, and there's just so many books in here written by Black people. And too often, you know, because of the lack of access, and books are expensive too. Yeah. I think we kind of, you know, limit our ability to be connected to our tradition.
Yeah. And sometimes it's laziness.
You know, and laziness. And laziness. I would agree. But I would say, you know, if we want to get free, there is no freedom without literature and critical engagement with literature. It's just, I mean, our whole faith is built on literature. Legit. Like, through, like our Christian faith has been kind of given to us through a certain literary kind of mechanism, through the written text. Toni Morrison, in her excellent essay, The Site of Memory, she talks about Black literature. And she says that Black literature, allows us to ponder the actual, but imagine the possible. And so when I think about that connection to Black literature, it will help us ponder the actual, what's going on in this moment, what has been going on. And when I say Black literature, I'm not even talking about like reading Black Christian literature. I'm talking about reading Black people in general. Right. I mean, all the way from reading Frederick Douglass to reading James Baldwin to reading Toni Morrison, reading Audre Lorde, to reading even writers today like Eddie Glaude and Imani Perry, or theological writings like Kelly Brown Douglas and James Cone and Dolores Williams and M. Sean Copeland, who's my favorite theological thinker today. Engaging with this literature is what I would say for us as Black people. But with white churches, I don't even, it's hard because, on the one hand, you have white churches who actually are trying. Yeah. But then you have white churches that's not really concerned.
Yeah. Speak to the ones that are trying. Just the ones that are
trying.
To
the ones that are trying. I definitely want to encourage the ones that are trying. This year has presented white Christians with questions years past they've been forced to deal with, but they kind of, was like, forget it, not really investing in it. But this year has presented a particular, kind of catalytic moment for white churches and white Christians to really legitimately change. And I would say, I know it's cliche, keep going and keep trying and keep wrestling, but I think that's legitimate advice is, you will never feel like, we're actually doing it always, like the right thing and the good thing. But I think as we just try and just show up every day, as white Christians try and show up every day and show up, in ways, that generate legitimate forms of solidarity. I think, even if the demographical makeup of one's church doesn't change, the kind of spiritual, political, and religious and moral kind of bent and framework of one's heart and the heart of one's congregation can show that congregation is a just church. Okay. And I would say, keep going and keep wrestling, keep trying, keep thinking, keep praying through it. And, hopefully one day, as we try and generate forms of legitimate solidarity, not simply with Christians, but I would even say, even interfaith forms of solidarity. Because as Christians, we're not trying to create a Christian nation, but we're trying to be Christians in a society that we want to become more loving and just. And so racially, that means that we have to think through like forms of sharing in common life together with people who are different than us. Yeah. In the political world, in the social world. And so I think I would even encourage Black Christians that way as well. I would encourage us that way to say, not everybody's going to agree with your politics. They may call you a liberal, progressive, woke, whatever. But I think, loving our neighbor matters more than what people call us.
To understand assimilationist thinking and those who have been freed from that thinking presupposes that it is a way of thinking that supplants foundational pillars of one's own culture and heritage to imbue a standard deemed more appropriate by the dominant culture which in this case is whiteness. We will unpack this idea of transition in proximity to whiteness in upcoming episodes. Hopefully, by gaining this understanding, the thing foremost in our hearts and minds is to continue to build bridges and not walls.
If you are a member of the Donors Table, you get access to today's unedited episode. Go check it out.
Thanks for listening to the Be the Bridge podcast. To find out more about the Be the Bridge organization and or to become a bridge builder in your community, go to bethebridge.com. Again, that's bethebridge.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, remember to rate and review it on this platform and share it with as many people as you possibly can. You can also connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Today's show was edited, recorded, and produced by Trayvon Potts at Integrated Entertainment Studios in Metro Atlanta, Georgia. The host and executive producer is Latasha Morrison. Lauren C. Brown is the senior producer. Brittany Prescott was our transcriber. Please join us next time. This has been a Be the Bridge production. Be the Bridge, 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 be the Bridge.